everybody? Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and the show, as always, presented by FanDuel. We'll have a FanDuel question of the day in just a moment, but we'll have a lot to break down here over the next hour. I'll be taking your questions, comments, thoughts, and reactions / overreacting to the Vikings loss to the Philadelphia Eagles, and I apologize for anytime that I'm looking over to my right, I'm watching Lions, Tampa Bay. Sometimes on a Monday night or Thursday night football, don't really have to keep an eye on it. But in the division, I'm going to be looking over here a little bit to the game as well. And so hopefully you're enjoying the game and listening to some Vikings talk and tossing some questions in that comment section. I would love if you guys would start out your questions or comments with, am I overreacting to say blank? Or just, sort of insinuate it. Like, am I overreacting to have X opinion? And then we can kind of talk about it that way because, the Vikings did drop to 3-3. And it was funny to go back and analyze that game when I looked at the tape today and I thought about how many really good plays they had, both on offense and defense. I thought Jalen Redmond had a really, really good game. They slowed down the run. It seemed like Philadelphia just got absolutely nothing from running the football. And there were a number of times where Jalen Hurts didn't see a whole lot to work with. He rolled out into technically a sack, or there were a handful of other plays where he didn't see where he's supposed to go with the ball initially, and then he's got to pull it down, and you're thinking, well, great job by the defense because they shut down the initial first read there for Jalen Hurts, and then all of a sudden, he scrambles out and he makes a big play, or somebody breaks open and he finds them. And it felt like this game was right there for the taking so many times for the Minnesota Vikings, even in the red zone. And I got a chance to look at the reverse angle of Blake Brandel simply knocking down a man's hands, which I think is allowed in football and yet was called as a penalty. In fact, it looked like there was even a chance that the defender may have tripped on someone else's foot as he was slapping his hands down, and that's why he went to the ground. It is as bad of a holding call as you'll see, but there's lots of other plays in the game that the Vikings absolutely caused their own fate. There's a throw to Jalen Nailor breaking open in the end zone on, I think, that same drive, maybe even the play before. I get them mixed up when they fail 5 different times in the red zone, but he's breaking open. He's one-on-one. A good throw is a touchdown, and the throw goes flying over Jalen Nailor's head. There's a lot of other times where the interior pressure just melted Carson Wentz, which it's hard to blame Carson Wentz. He showed a little mobility, but you're not talking about the best playmaker. You're not talking about the fastest processor in history. You're talking about a backup caliber quarterback at this point in his career. They get in the red zone, nobody's open, doesn't pull the trigger, and immediately sacked on a pass rush up the middle. That happened late in the game. There were a few different times, including the pick 6, where Blake Brandel was beaten soundly so quickly that there's not a lot that we should expect Carson Wentz to be able to do in those spots other than just dirt the ball. But, I will say I have to correct something that I may have said. I didn't remember a lot of pressure on that ball that he got called for intentional grounding, but it was about to arrive. And that's why he just tossed the ball down in the ground. But no doubt a very bad decision by Carson Wentz. So it was a little bit of everything when it came to the red zone. It was a bad call by the refs. Justin Jefferson can't bring in a ball that we usually expect him to, but as he was spinning around, Cooper DeJean right at the last minute taps the ball out. It's some missed throws. It's some inaccurate throws. It's some bad decisions. It's not being able to pound the ball in. Xavier Scott looked like he was going to be able to get in, but then got kind of stoned. Well, actually, they scored on the next play after that, so that one wasn't too bad. But, there were just so many times where they were close, and close does not count in the NFL. And then times on defense where it looked like they were going to slow down Philadelphia's offense, and then it's a 3rd and 13, and A.J. Brown does awesome things against Jeff Okudah. Watching the tape on that play, it was actually amazing. A.J. Brown, as soon as Jalen Hurts starts to scramble, he pushes upfield, knowing that he's going to come back to the ball. So he kind of dekes like he's going to go deep and then turns around, and then he's got a break on Jeff Okudah, makes the play. Devontae Smith actually did something earlier in the game that was very similar to that against Okudah, where it looked like he was going deep, and then he breaks back to Jalen Hurts. I'm sure that that's something that the Eagles work on all the time, and that chemistry was really evident for them. So even though the game was really defined by the big mistakes, the missed opportunities, there were also a lot of things that they did well, including Jordan Addison had a phenomenal game. Absolutely phenomenal. He was cooking people with his route running. He was open all day. The outbreaking routes, they had no chance at whatsoever. There were some very nice play designs by Kevin O'Connell to get Justin Jefferson the ball. He came out of the backfield at one point. There was the 40-yard catch where they picked a really good play against the blitz, and that left that side of the field vacated. He catches the ball. He goes down the sideline, and they just could not finish in that game, and then couldn't get that one big stop that they needed time and time again. Now, on the big picture of that is all the things I described to you is what 500 teams do. 500 teams have a lot of moments where you go, oh, wow, that's a great play by Jordan Addison. And then they have a lot of moments where you go, how can you give up that big play? How can you make that big mistake? How can you not finish that drive? And so forth. And you guys are very well versed in 500 football because you saw so much of it during the Kirk era. And it was a lot of this. I mean, even think of the 4-4 start to the beginning of the 2023 season. That's what this has felt like, almost carbon copy. Some players get hurt. The defense is up and down. You have some wins that you like. You have some losses that you're surprised by. It comes down to, hey, why didn't that guy catch that ball in the end zone? Or in the case of 2023, why are they fumbling so much? Or why did it hit that dude in the face mask and end up being a touchdown? Since that game is on my mind a little bit with the Vikings playing the Chargers this week, it's been the same type of thing. And we can go through all of those from 2020, from 2021. How about 2021, where they were in a bunch of close games, but they blew them because the ball hit Bashaud Breeland and tipped right into the hands of CeeDee Lamb. And then Dallas with Cooper Rush converts a fourth down, throwing to Ezekiel Elliott to set up a score. I mean, you remember all of those games. Dalvin Cook, was it a fumble? Actually, the Blake Brandel hold reminded me of that. And there was another play against Kansas City in 2023 that was not called as pass interference, which it maybe clearly was, but Jordan Addison didn't throw his hands up enough. You remember that? So you could think of all these teams that were 500 where we end up obsessing over a couple of missed calls or a drop in the end zone that should have been a catch, but the referees in New York decided to slow it down to the millisecond, and they saw the very nose of the ball scrape against one piece of little rubber pellet or something in the end zone. So that's not a catch anymore. But normally, if you're a good team and these things happen to you, you just win anyway. And you forget about those. I mean, last year, I'm sure that last year when they were going 14-3, there was a flag or two that were thrown that we didn't agree with, or that were bad calls, or there was a review that the Vikings were on the wrong side of, and we went, what the heck are the rules? I'm sure that happened at some point, but do they stick out in your mind the same way? No, because the team ultimately ended up going on to win. How about, I remember in the 2022 comeback game against Indianapolis, where there was at least one, maybe even two touchdowns that were taken off the board on fumbles. I mean, definitely one, where it was a fumble and the Vikings picked it up and ran it for a touchdown. And then they said he was down, but then when you looked at it, it didn't really look like it. But we don't remember that. They came back to win. What difference does it make? It's only when your team is around 500 that those things eat at you the way that they have for the Vikings. And the bottom line after that game, which I think was very much a pivot point for this season, this kind of 2-game section. But if you could win 2, then, okay, well, you're kind of a contender. If you win 1, you're the 500 team that we're kind of talking about. And if you win 0, you're probably just not good. If you're facing Philly and Los Angeles and you split them, then you're okay. If you lose 2, then we're just talking about, well, this is going to be one of those mostly lost seasons. And we'll, of course, get into how it can maybe not be lost. But I felt like this is 500 team stuff. It's all stuff we've seen before. And I just didn't really have the energy to rant about the replay system. I think that you guys know as well as anybody that it's driven me insane since they brought instant replay back to the NFL. The way that they do it, the challenge system, what is New York allowed to do and what are they not allowed to do? And why does it seem like they make their own rules? Because who's going to stop them? The Detroit Lions should be as annoyed as anybody that New York can just buzz in and say they had an illegal formation. Now, wait a minute. If it's not called on the field, and this is, I haven't let it go from last week. If it's not called on the field, you can buzz in and call it. So why not Sam Darnold's face mask last year? So there's a lot of different things there. If the ruling on the field is that it was a touchdown, my understanding was that the ruling on the field carries the most weight. So if it's not definitive. Now in the stadium, they show like, here's what New York is looking at. Any of you at the game, you saw this yesterday. And I'm looking and I'm watching and I'm going, I don't know how they can overturn this. I was very confident they weren't going to overturn it. And then there they go. So what are the rules? Nobody knows. Bad holding calls. Yeah, that happens. But not being able to figure out what a catch is, that's something that I thought was resolved many years ago. My point though is I just don't really have the energy for that when you feel like this team showed so much weakness in the game yesterday, so many gaping holes in the game yesterday that are very, very similar to what we saw against Pittsburgh. And I remember doing the post game after Pittsburgh and saying, this is a very disturbing loss because Pittsburgh had all the answers. And while Philadelphia didn't run as well as Pittsburgh, they had the answers, which was taking advantage of the Vikings in coverage. That's what DK Metcalf did. That's what Devontae Smith and AJ Brown did. It was funny. I was adding up their yardage yesterday and I was like 200. Wait a minute. How many yards did they end up with? And then you add up. It's kind of crazy to think about when you add up what Aaron Rodgers did and Jalen Hurts, literally the only two good quarterbacks they've faced this year, which makes this even more disturbing how they've played because the toughest quarterbacks are yet to come. They haven't even faced a murderer's row of quarterbacks. Caleb Williams in his first game where he didn't have the scheme down and was struggling early on. Still, Caleb Williams gets a big lead on them. Michael Penix, who has not played great. I think he's been okay. He's had his ups and downs, but he certainly hasn't been anywhere near great. And you kill Jake Browning. Okay, well, he's been benched since. Aaron Rodgers is not even the same Aaron Rodgers, but still obviously is very good. Completes 90% of his passes against you and has no trouble whatsoever. I think, what did he take? Maybe 1 or 2 sacks in the game. They go up against Dylan Gabriel. Even he had his moments. He threw a couple touchdowns. They didn't get the ball away from him or really sack him a whole lot. And then here's Jalen Hurts, a star quarterback, a Super Bowl MVP quarterback, and he makes the defense look like they could not do anything out there. And that's why I bring up 2023, 2021, where it's like there's a lot of talented players on this defense, but it also feels like there's a lot of holes on this defense that are going to be very hard to cover up. So the two teams that you've played that are decent, or even if we include Atlanta, I mean, the only good win is against Chicago, and that had to come with what seemed like historic until what Denver did yesterday, but an unbelievable, furious comeback at the very end to get away with it and leave Chicago with a win. I mean, that's how close they are to having either 1 or 2 wins and then having to have a furious comeback against the Cleveland Browns. All this stuff, again, just sort of screams you're a 500 team, which I think is why the reaction to yesterday's game, which was, as is for every loss, but this one especially felt like ferocious from the fans. I think there's a line, of course, there's a line. Crossing the line to fire this person, fire that person. Okay, all right. Like, I get it, but everyone wants to rage out against the coach and all that. Like, that's, typical stuff, but within reason. But I think that in terms of being very gut punched by the loss was that you've seen that movie so many times before where the quarterback is pretty good and has his moments in the game and throws for a lot of yards, but then has this enormous, gargantuan mistake where he clearly should have just taken the sack, but he didn't see the outside linebacker dropping. And we've seen, Kirk make that mistake before. You've seen, Sam Darnold make that mistake before. And so it's not the first time anyone's ever done it. In fact, that's why Dick LeBeau ran those types of pressures so much during his career. It was an answer to the West Coast offense. It was an answer to all those slants and things like that. So Philly called the right defense at the right time, but he sees that if Jalen Carter isn't screaming toward him and destroying the center on that play. And there it is again, where it's like, yeah, you're really good. Darisaw had a good game. O'Neal had a good game. I thought that Jackson came back pretty well. Fries was fine in pass protection, but the one weakness, there it is getting you. And on the defensive side, Jalen Redmond had a great game. Jonathan Allen had a great game. I didn't think it was Blake Cashman's typical Blake Cashman stuff. I think he's still coming back, but you noticed him out there as a difference maker, having him and Wilson instead of Pace. It's good. But your weakness of taking on elite wide receivers with a guy who's the first time full-time starter at corner, or Josh Metellus ending up in deep coverage versus AJ Brown, these are the weaknesses of the Minnesota Vikings, and a team like Philly is going to be able to take advantage of them. So as they go forward, you're kind of feeling like it's going to be a lot of the same stuff, where maybe they'll beat the Chargers and it'll feel like the season's back on, and then lose to Detroit and it'll feel like the season's back off, and you're getting jostled around. And at the end of the day, you're hoping for three teams to lose on the final week of the season, and they don't, and you miss the playoffs, and then it all feels like, what happened here? And there's only really one way out of that, my friends, which is why you could say that it's the right reaction, and I would generally agree. But the reason it might be an overreaction is that if we pull back and we think about what this season was supposed to be, this season was supposed to be JJ McCarthy throwing to Addison, Jefferson, Hockenson, and the whole franchise pushing forth through the tough moments, like Atlanta, right? That's what this was supposed to be. It was supposed to be the supporting cast rallies around the young quarterback. He develops on the fly. Yeah, there's some bad moments, but then there's some flashes of greatness, like in the fourth quarter against Chicago, and we ride that roller coaster. The defense shuts teams down, so if you get 5 field goals, then maybe you win the game anyway, which is what we thought was going to happen with this team. There's so many of those things that what we were told, what I told you, what I thought was going to happen, what they told us. It's like they tell us, I tell you, and everybody's wrong. And you get excited about it, and we all are looking at it like, what happened is kind of how it goes, right? That's what was supposed to be the plan. And having not been able to see JJ McCarthy go through those ups and downs, and now we're talking about, if he doesn't start this week, we're talking about 6 weeks that he's going to be out. And that's missing another big chunk of his early development and growth. If they were 3-3 and he had played exactly the same way Carson Wentz has played, we would probably say, well, hey, he'll never throw that interception again. And hey, tough game, but he fought and he's going to have to improve. But, it's the Super Bowl champs, and 3-3, you're still in it. Turn a corner. I think you could be okay. But not having it be JJ McCarthy, that's where it felt like, what did we just do for the last 3 hours? Because no real progress was made. And I think that that's the difference between last year and this year, which is, and even going back to 2023, is that you felt like the 2023 season, just by proxy of them getting the salary cap right for the future, that was progress. And setting themselves up, honestly, with a good draft pick in the top 11 at the time. They moved up to 10, but a good draft pick to draft a quarterback, that was progress. Even though it was a bad and frustrating 7-10 season, they still set themselves up for the future. And last year, it felt very important, even though it didn't end the way you wanted to. It felt very important for the coaching staff to show us what they were made of, for KOC to show that the QB whisperer thing is real, and for Brian Flores to show that he could take free agent talent that he identifies and turn it into stars, right? Like all this stuff, we came away feeling like, hey, silver lining to a bad ending of a 14-3 season is that we know who we were dealing with here. And the coach gets the extension and the GM gets the extension. And you think, well, okay, now you're set up. And all the things that you felt like were going to happen, that the defensive tackles were going to rush the passer and make a huge difference instead of Javon Hargrave only playing a handful of snaps. Although Redmond might just be great. He was absolutely dominant in this game. He just made play after play, and Levi Drake Rodriguez has been good too. So I guess, maybe 2 steps forward and 1 step back there, but still, nonetheless, like you thought that they were going to find these guys in the secondary, revamp them, similar to how they did with free agents before. And you thought that the receivers, the offensive line, the money that they had spent on it was going to support the young quarterback. And what you also thought was that you were going to see JJ McCarthy day in and day out. And that, I think, is what has everyone as down as they are. Because if they were 3-3 and it was with JJ McCarthy, then you wouldn't be thrilled and you'd be saying, it's an uphill battle from here. Detroit's going to be tough, and the Chargers are going to be tough this week. And even when you go into the future, like Baltimore is just not going to give you the game if Lamar Jackson is back. Chicago's playing better. But I think that everyone would be sort of up for it. And you would be walking away from some of these games saying, you know what, it's not what we thought it was going to be, but did you see those 10 throws by JJ McCarthy? Did you see those 5 plays by JJ McCarthy that if he just eliminates a couple of the mistakes, then they're going to win some of these games? And if they make the playoffs with him, like that's not even hard to talk yourself into. But without him playing, it feels so much more like purgatory and the place that this franchise has been in for a long time. And so that's why I think that the reaction from yesterday from fans, well, of course, it's always going to be overreacting to a lot of different individual performances or so forth. I mean, some people just get really enraged and yell that KOC can't call plays, even though if you watch the tape, you're like, I don't know how much more open you could get some of these guys. Right? I mean, and the TJ Hawkinson catch, by the way, that is as routine as a wide open touchdown as you can get. And Carson Wentz misses him because he's Carson Wentz. And that happened a few times. So I think that a lot of folks you lost and you need to point your anger at something. But the reality is the reason this season hasn't been fun is because it hasn't been anything like what it was expected to be. And even if it was 75% of what you expected it to be, which let's say is just McCarthy, and then some of these other things fall apart. Jones doesn't stay healthy and Hargrave's not as good as you expected or whatever. You could work your way through that if you were riding the roller coaster with the young quarterback. When you're riding the roller coaster with the backup as the young quarterback sits on the sideline, it doesn't feel like an overreaction to be throwing up your hands and saying, WTF is this season. And then today, this brings me all to today, because I think some folks were hoping that because Wentz played as poorly as he did, that he would be benched for the game on Thursday. And well, that is, I suppose, possible. And we're going to hear from Kevin O'Connell tomorrow. I mean, maybe, but they have to estimate what they would do in practice had they had a real practice. That's how you do it. On a Monday, when there's a Thursday night game, they have to put out an injury report and it has to be an estimate. So who would have practiced in full, who would not have practiced in full. And JJ McCarthy listed as not practicing in full. Now, it's not a real practice, so I guess, I don't know. Like, it's just, I don't think he would have. But for him not to be back fully practicing weeks and weeks and weeks after an injury that he was able to finish the game. And I can get to those conspiracy theories, and then we'll talk about your comments for about a half hour. And then we'll, get on to Brian Murphy and Manny Hill at 7:30. But to have him finish the game, come out with an ankle injury, sound like it's 1 or 2 weeks, and then still not a chance to see him, it doesn't look like, against the Chargers, that has felt very empty as well, because all of this time not practicing in full is development time. It actually would have been better if the conspiracies were real and he had just been benched and then could have been practicing. That actually would have been way better than the reality. The reality is that he hasn't been able to practice in full, which means not being able to make significant or as significant of progress on all those things that Kevin O'Connell was talking about. So they'll practice tomorrow. That's the only time they'll practice. It would be pretty surprising if he went from inactive on a Sunday, one practice, to starting on Thursday against the Chargers, which really brings us to going on, week 9 against Detroit. I think what was confirmed by Wentz's performance is that he is a great backup. Like, don't get me wrong. He is a great backup. This is as good as you could get. 2-2. Find me all the backups around the NFL who are winning games. There aren't many of them. He's a good backup quarterback. The Case Keenum thing will probably never happen again, where you have a quarterback of that level who just wins 13 games. So Wentz has done the job. He's kept the season alive. And if he gets to 4-3, no matter how he plays, JJ McCarthy should be the starting quarterback against the Detroit Lions on week 9. In fact, if he's not, it would be truly disturbing if he's not the quarterback, because that means either another setback with the ankle, or that means he's not just soft bench, he's totally benched, which wouldn't make any sense compared to what we've seen for the quarterback play of Wentz. It's been okay. It's been maddening. He could get the ball to the number 1 and 2 wide receivers, but can he consistently throw it accurately? Absolutely not at this point in his career. But he can win you a game against Cincinnati or Cleveland, and he's not going to win you a game against a future Hall of Famer. And I don't want to say that quite about Hurts yet, but a Super Bowl champion. He's not going to outperform those guys in a one-on-one battle. So if McCarthy comes back, and this would be the brightest possible version, and the only way that this ends up being an overreaction to the Eagles' loss is if JJ McCarthy comes back against Detroit and they're 4-3, and you still feel like the season is on, and there's a chance for McCarthy to get hot and win some games and pull off another division victory against the team that's really struggling in its secondary, although they're doing a great job tonight so far against Baker Mayfield. But you get my point. If he can come back and play the remainder of the season healthy and play 500 football after going 4-3 as a team and inheriting a 4-3 team, they could beat the Chargers here and go 500 and then get to the end of the year and look around and go, hey, you finished with a winning record. Maybe you made the playoffs. Maybe you didn't. In the NFC, that might be difficult this year. That can still be a success for this team, setting itself up for the following season. And then, of course, some changes are going to have to be made with the roster, and they're carrying over cap space, and they can make adjustments to people's contracts. They've set themselves up for that. And, because I'll see every once in a while, oh, the Vikings, what are they going to do? They're X number of dollars under, over the cap. And we've seen the Saints, right? Like, the Saints have been over the cap for 15 straight years. I'm not saying the cap isn't real. It is, and we know it is from previous experience, but they are in the window where you can do stuff to extend the window. So there could still be light at the end of the tunnel, even without a perfect scenario. But it has to begin with JJ McCarthy coming back and playing. And even if it's a roller coaster, having more good than bad, and even if the defense isn't what it was supposed to be, giving them a chance to win some big games here or there could make this a lot more successful than it appears right now. So while your reactions are very legitimate, the thing that is the most important is still on the way. I think that's the whole point of this. It took me a while to get there, but the thing that's the most important is not happening right now and is supposed to happen soon. And I do want to say, I get it. I really do. I understand how the outside world works. The internet, the big TV talking head and everything else. Hey, Bryce Young's week to week with an ankle injury. Patrick Mahomes would have been playing with an ankle injury. Why isn't JJ McCarthy? He must be soft benched, or he must be a wuss or something. I don't really know what the other implication is, but it seems like people are saying it like that. I think that as much as the internet loves a theory, a conspiracy, the answer has been given right to us that's the most plausible, which is that McCarthy got hurt in the game. It was expected to be 2 to 4 weeks, like Adam Schefter said. And then they went overseas. He experienced some swelling. He didn't get practice in overseas. They came back. He did some workout in the bye week, was not 100%, and he told us last week, not 100%. And Kevin O'Connell doesn't want to start him at less than 100%. And if they were playing next Sunday, maybe he would be starting. But the way the schedule has played out, and this goes for going overseas for 2 weeks, this goes for coming back and playing a Thursday game, it has not been a normal, favorable schedule for somebody to just stay in Eagan, Minnesota and work on his ankle and have a normal amount of practice and get back on the field. And that has held him back. And then now, if you were asking him to start on a Thursday with no real practice, that seems like it would be very difficult to do. They might. And trust me, everybody would, go outside and light firecrackers and shoot fireworks into the sky with joy that he was coming back. But I don't know if that's the smartest thing to do for him, as opposed to having an extra day of practice next week leading into the Lions, getting him back to as close to 100% as he can be before he goes out there and starts. Because if they can beat the Chargers, who are really struggling right now, then your season is still in front of you with a chance for him to improve and play the best he can play and maybe get you into the playoffs. So pushing him out there at less than 100% against Philly, who, as you saw, has a pretty nasty defensive tackle group and really wrecked Carson Wentz a bunch of times. Did you want JJ McCarthy facing that on a bum ankle? I don't really think so. And then going out and facing the Chargers with almost no preparation. Well, what happened the last time they played on a short week and he missed some practice? Wasn't locked in, didn't play well, struggled, and ends up getting hurt. So why would you want to repeat that and throw him out there on a Thursday? Makes much more sense to try to win it with Wentz and try to beat a team that is really down in Los Angeles and then come back against the Lions. I understand why people without the full context just see a Schefter tweet and they go, what are they hiding? But, it's really gotten kind of exhausting with this team over the years. Almost every time we've had something come up where the internet and the talking heads are going, what's going on there? Every time it's bogus. Kwesi got his extension. KOC wasn't traded. Justin Jefferson wasn't traded. And these are all things that the people in AI wrote 7 gazillion articles about, and yet it was all for nothing. At least no one actually used their real fingers to type Justin Jefferson trade rumors. They just had bots do it, because how stupid was that? And yet that was a thing for months and months and months. Where are they going to trade Justin Jefferson? They were never going to. It's the same way with, maybe there was some talk about the general manager, but always the most obvious answer seemed like the right one. And they were definitely not trading away Kevin O'Connell. So there's been a bunch of micro versions of that over. I mean, what are people not telling you in Minnesota about JJ McCarthy? It's like, oh, I don't know. Like, right. I mean, that whole thing, as in, again, the most obvious answer was they drafted him 10th overall and they designed the entire offseason around the idea of having the 10th overall pick. And then they went with him. It's not now whether that's going to work out for them or not is still something to be determined. And the way that Sam Darnold is playing is not making it look great, but it was the plan all along. If they thought Darnold, when they signed him, was their franchise quarterback, it wouldn't have been to $10 million and 1 year. It would have been a longer term contract than that. And if you think that they should have gotten Rodgers, well, maybe, but if they were 3-3, maybe even 4-2 and felt this flawed with Aaron Rodgers, would you feel like Super Bowl is around the corner? Even do you feel like the Steelers are going to win the Super Bowl and kind of similar teams? Not really, right? So the most obvious answer for why they stuck with McCarthy was right there in front of you. And yet we got all sorts of what's really going on behind the scenes. So I really don't think that there's anything nefarious going on with JJ McCarthy other than, I mean, we've been told all of it. And yes, I do talk to folks outside of just what we're told in press conferences, believe it or not. And, the swelling for McCarthy's ankle, not being 100%, initially thinking he would be back faster, like all that stuff is also what I've been told. So look, the season is still in front of them. It's just this Thursday, it's probably not going to feel like the real season starting. When they face Detroit, assuming McCarthy is back, that will be the unofficial restart of the season. You know how like in a Daytona 500, they're going around. Here comes the storm clouds. And now everybody has to pull into their pit stop and sit there and wait through the rain. When are we going to get back to racing? And then, all right, here comes the big restart. That's what Detroit's going to feel like in week 9, assuming that McCarthy is good to go. So, I did feel like a lot of people already at 3-3 were bailing on the season. It's over. McCarthy's a bust. Fire the coach, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I really feel like getting through this week and then McCarthy coming back changes everything. Does it change who they really are in terms of record-wise and where they're going to finish? Probably not. This is probably who they're going to be the rest of the way. Disappointing loss followed by a decent win. Maybe there's a great win in there. Maybe there's a horrific loss in there. That's probably how it's going to be the rest of the way. But if they're doing that with McCarthy, it feels so much different. That's the point. Here is your FanDuel question of the day, and then I'll get to your comments. And in 25 minutes, Manny Hill and Brian Murphy for the Roundtable. The FanDuel question of the day is the Vikings drop to plus 1,700 to win the NFC North. The Bears are ahead of them at plus 1,000. Are you buying right now that the Vikings will finish behind the Chicago Bears, who pulled off a pretty decided victory against Spencer Rattler, the internet's darling, and Caleb Williams? So there you have it. All right, let's get into your questions and comments. Let's see. Deshante says, when the plays are open, I can't say KOC is a bad play caller. Well, the thing about judging a play caller, one is doing it off of TV is very hard because you can't see the whole play. You see the quarterback and then people run out of the screen and then the ball gets released and then you go, well, bad play call. And that's why you do have to look really at the all 22 tape to get a sense for the plays. But I think that what ends up happening is, like, think about Nick Sirianni, right? Now, Nick Sirianni gets slaughtered all the time as a head coach in Philadelphia, I think, which is the nature of the beast of being the head coach of Philadelphia, because they're crazy and that they're always relevant and they're always in the news. And so every mistake that Nick Sirianni makes, he is really, scrutinized for. Can we look up right now real quick what Nick Sirianni's career record as a coach is? Let's just take a little look-see about Nick Sirianni. Just going to make a point here. Nick Sirianni is 53-22 with a Super Bowl victory and a Super Bowl appearance. And if you read the interwebs, you would think this guy sucks. You would think he has no idea what he's doing. He's just this fool over on the sideline who's crying at the Super Bowl and fighting with a security guy or whatever. He's 53-22. He's got 2 Super Bowl appearances and a Super Bowl win. Do you think he's a moron? Like, no. But what happens is when coaches aren't perfect, and this was Andy Reid for a long time in Philly, when coaches aren't perfect, and we watch them all the time. Philly's games are on national TV every time. So Sirianni makes a mistake. Uh-oh. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to go to the house, and it's 14-0 Lions. Woo. Okay. Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs have certainly made their case for drafting running backs. Anyway, the point about Andy Reid, Nick Sirianni, is when we focus so much and we see so much, we start to pick out every single mistake and nitpick away and nitpick away and nitpick away. And then we say, well, this guy must be a bad coach. And they're like, oh, wait, he's 53-22 with a Super Bowl. So he's probably not. And I think the same thing goes for KOC. Not that he's on the level of being that record in the Super Bowl, but as far as, is he perfect? Do all of his play calls work all the time? No. Are there times where I have said in the past, stick with the run, or, hey, you don't need to do that trick play, or when you get into the red zone, like maybe just 2nd and 1, smash it forward with Jordan Mason. I don't know, right? Or I've wondered, like you guys have, is it harder than it needs to be on the offensive line? Is it harder than it needs to be on the quarterback? I mean, there's a play yesterday where there's 3 guys running routes and motions and doing all this stuff, and Wentz just doesn't see it and gets sacked, and you go, was there something a little simpler available? But then you look at the end of the day and there's open receivers, there's plays to be made. The play call, even against that blitz where he threw simulated pressure, where he threw the pick 6, Jefferson is about to be wide open on that play. One more click, one more second in the pocket, and he's run into space, and it's a 20-yard gain. Is it a good play call? I mean, it's a fine play call. It's just that your center has to block for more than a third of a second, and your quarterback needs to just take the sack as opposed to throwing it right to the outside linebacker. But that's football kind of always and forever. I think the biggest sample would tell us that there's imperfections and it hasn't been flawless, but the production from the quarterbacks has overall been good, and that he could certainly get receivers open. How open was Jordan Addison yesterday? And some of it on deep routes down the field. We've loved the quick game and all that, but some of it's deep and it's wide open and you're making plays. I mean, you gotta, like, somebody's got to make a play in the red zone and finish that stuff off. Like, I don't know what more can you do, really, right? You can't throw it for him. So, or you can't even intentionally ground it for him in that case. CJ Ham's wide open. I mean, that's a Ham touchdown if you just fling it to the flat, which I assume was an option on the play. So, it's kind of a weekly thing in football. It's one of the reasons football is great, is that we can pick apart that sort of stuff and, I wouldn't have called that play, or I wouldn't have gone for it there. It is truly what makes football an awesome sport. But, I think that they have good enough play calling from Kevin O'Connell to win a lot of games because we've seen them do it. So if they're not doing it, if they're not producing on offense, it's probably more of the quarterback play, which it certainly was. It certainly was against the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, we talk about PFF grades a lot. Maybe we should do a bit like, do I agree with this PFF grade or no? And I'll tell you, like Carson Wentz's, I think, was like a 40, and the answer would be yes, I do agree with it. Yeah, 45. Yep. I do agree with it. That's about the type of performance that they got yesterday, with just huge mistakes, missed open throws. There's not a whole lot you could do about that. TJ Hawkins is wide open. Just get him the football. Don't make him dive for it. Don't make the ref have to make a call there. So anyway, it often comes down to whether you're a genius play caller or not, often comes down to whether your quarterback can execute. Let's see. Sorry if I pronounced this wrong. Alumide. Can you answer why Wentz is starting next week? Well, it's this week. That's the trouble. Is I think if it was next week, if it was next Sunday against the Los Angeles Chargers, then they would go out and hire the best ankle specialist in the United States of America to get his butt in here and get him to as close to 100% as you could get JJ McCarthy. But you have one practice, and it might not even be a real, like, hardcore practice. One practice when he hasn't practiced almost at all for weeks, and then go play on Thursday is just a lot. So I also don't know that he's not playing on Thursday. It's possible that he is. That KOC could come out tomorrow, and that'll be one heck of a podcast if they do. I'll enjoy that podcast if they do, talking about JJ McCarthy starting. So we don't know that for sure. I just think it's very unlikely that McCarthy will be the starter because just you don't have time to really implement a game plan. You almost have to go with your base type of stuff when you're playing on Thursday Night Football. And that's why we see so much ugly type of performance on Thursday night. Oh man. Mike Evans just hit the ground super hard. It does not look very, looks like a concussion for him. It doesn't look good at all. Oof. Jeez. He's such a great player. That is so tough. They've had so many guys injured this year. And that's I think the second time he's been hurt. That's really tough. So the point is that it's really just about the circumstance. I think if it was next Sunday, he would be starting, but that's really the only reason why. Sean says, really hard to observe that Wentz missed open receivers a bunch of times and then say that he should have run the ball. Well, I mean, I don't think that O'Connell needed to run the ball more yesterday than he did, and they weren't having a ton of success with it. 3.8 yards per carry. The run game was not really driving them. And here's the other problem. And this is the problem in general with how they've played against Pittsburgh, Atlanta, and against the Philadelphia Eagles, is that they've played from behind the whole game. These losses were real, legit losses. Like, you get behind and you're behind the whole game. And then you're desperately hoping that your backup quarterback can go win you a game by throwing his way back into it. That's not how this was supposed to go. And that's why I was talking about how, like, this isn't what it was supposed to be. That was my column for this morning, purpleinsider.football, is like, they were supposed to be able to win a game against Philadelphia by grinding it out, keeping possession, getting the defense to get some huge stops. And right away, it's 7-0 on the first drive, converting a big play downfield on a mismatch. And then it's a pick six and it's 14-3. And like, that's not how this team is meant to play. They're not meant to play 14-3 and then have the quarterback come back and win it. They don't have the quarterback for it right now. And I don't know that JJ McCarthy will be that quarterback either. So yeah, you could say, hey, run. You should run more and everything. The passing game was working to get them to the red zone, by the way. So I don't know. But you can't really run. If you look at that win probability chart, I looked at the win probability chart after the game. There are no plays that the Vikings had yesterday where they had more than a 50% chance to win. They were never in a position to win according to the win probability chances. You can't really sit there and ground and pound and throw a bunch of short passes in that case. You have to take risks. You have to put the game on the shoulders of the quarterback. And if it's Carson Wentz, that's just a lot to ask. KFT says KOC may feel that McCarthy will benefit being totally healthy in his first year playing. If he were a 2-year veteran, he would be playing already. Well, you see, the issue with that, KFT, is that you're using your brain. What you're supposed to do is log onto the internet and shut your brain off and just yell what everyone else yells. That's your mistake, KFT. Don't be using that noggin of yours. I mean, it's just been a little ludicrous, right? Is it a good idea to play an inexperienced quarterback at less than 100%? Probably not. It's just probably not. And people are comparing it to Bryce Young. Well, Bryce Young's been starting in the league for 3 years. And, he's week to week. All right, well, good luck if they bring him back with an injured ankle. And Bryce Young's not really a scrambler. He's kind of a playmaker. He's not really a scrambler. But why would it make any sense on a short week to bring him back if he hasn't practiced and isn't 100% when he's starting his third game ever? I wouldn't think this was a good idea for anybody in the position that they're in if they had this little experience like JJ McCarthy did. Now, if he was coming off the best 2 games in NFL history to start a career and threw for 600 yards and 8 touchdowns, and then he got the ankle injury, yeah, you'd be more willing to push him back out there. But when there already were some issues that you're trying to work your way through in practice and resolve, then is it a good idea to bring him back in when he can't do that stuff at 100%? And the other thing is too, that you get an extra practice before Detroit. You get a little extra time here. I mean, that just makes sense with this being the time to do it. And if he hadn't even just told us, now I might buy it a little bit more of like soft benching. If he hadn't come out and told us that there was additional swelling and he's not at 100%. And you could say, well, what if he's lying about that? Well, I've also, confirmed that as well. But like, look, if it was a soft benching, I don't know if he's playing along, right? Is he going to go to the podium and be like, yes, coach told me that I'm less than 100%. Probably not, right? Like, he would probably be like, buddy wants to play, right? So anyway, well, I mean, you could take the facts and, make them whatever you want. So here's the rule, by the way, for Cody, who says KOC's a bad play caller. You have to tell me why. This is the problem with people who say bad play caller. You have to tell me why. if you don't give me specifics, I'm not going to bother with your comment. It just doesn't mean anything. It's like, I'm 7 feet tall. I don't have to back it up. I'm just 7 feet tall. Is it true? No, but it doesn't matter. I'm just saying it. I'm 7 feet tall. It's like the same thing. Like, it's a bad play caller. I'm just saying it. Like, you need to have a reason. We work in specifics on this show. It's a long show. It's 2 hours long. So, let's see. Marauder, why would you want JJ versus the Lions without a warm up against the Chargers? Is it a good way to warm up with no time to practice, no time to implement a game plan? I don't think so. They might agree with you. They might agree with you. A warm up against the Chargers, though, I don't know about that. I mean, that's still they've been struggling. They have been struggling, but I don't know that the Chargers are a super easy opponent, and I think there will be a lot of Chargers fans there at the game since they've become a more relevant franchise. Red 854 Lava Fires, that's a heck of a name. It's all KOC does is ask too much of JJ. Guy can't run the ball. Well, look, he's had 2 games, and I, to tell you the truth, don't think against Atlanta or Chicago they asked too much of JJ McCarthy. They won one of the games. He played poorly in the other game. And you're going to have to, in what way did they ask him to do too much? Because they were right there in the goal line. He fumbled. He gets strip sacked. He threw an interception on a wide open out route. Like, I don't know, man. It's usually all that happens with play calling complaints is just you look at the results. And if they're not what you want, you say the guy did all the things wrong. And that's what we do in football. That's just what we do. But we try to be better than that on this show. Zoomer Kev or Zoomer KO now. I guess you've changed it. Am I overreacting to say, there you go. I forgot that I even threw that out there. The overreacting. So thank you for bringing me back. Am I overreacting to say KO is under the most pressure he's ever had to face as a head coach? Now that is a very good and reasonable question. Zoomer KO. I think the answer is easily yes. 100% yes, for a few different reasons. Number one is I think that we all agreed that when they got here, it was a long journey. And you know how I like to use kind of objective measures for things, whether it's FanDuel's numbers or, hey, this other person who has nothing to do with this situation said X, Y, or Z, Mike Clay trying to project their rosters and things like that, or make projections, stuff like that. When Kevin O'Connell was hired, NFL.com did a ranking of like who has the best roster that they're inheriting, the best situation. And I think there were 10 coaches. I'm going to ballpark this. I think there were 10 or 11 coaches, and the KO hire was maybe 7th on that list. And they talked about like uncertainty at quarterback, older roster that hasn't been able to win anything. And we would all agree that it wasn't the easiest situation to take over. They win 13 games. They don't get it done in the playoffs. And then we also, I think, all agree it's a good idea to move on from Dalvin Cook, Eric Kendricks, Adam Thielen, like all those guys, right? Those expensive older players. Move on from them, reset the salary cap. You're probably going to have a tough year. And they did. And they drafted a quarterback because of it. And then I think we all agreed that the plan made a lot of sense to draft a quarterback, spend the money in free agency, and then go forward, right? Sam Darnold throws a wrinkle in that by being awesome, but they hadn't set up their salary cap for a $40 million quarterback. I think they still could have done it if they needed to, but that was never the plan. So then you're going forward with the plan. But once you draft the quarterback, that's where the heat gets turned up, because through this entire journey to this point, it was, hey, in the future, this is the thing that's going to happen. That thing that's worked for so many franchises, including Philadelphia. This is going to happen. Just wait. That's going to happen. Hey, 14-3 is great, but hey, yeah, the next year, now that's where it's really going to be big for this team, right? The next 2 years, that window, that Super Bowl window. I think it was Jeremy Fowler at the beginning of the season or offseason said that they view it as a 3-year Super Bowl window. Okay, well, the coach with no playoff wins, who has gotten the benefit of the doubt, very reasonably so, for winning 14 games. That ain't easy. Not too many teams are doing that. And sometimes we're like, oh, well, they lost in the playoffs, so they're schmucks anyway. But I mean, my goodness, look how hard it is to win 10 games in the NFL, much less 14. So, the 13-win season, the 14-win season, it's really good coaching. The culture's changed. It's turned around. It's a place where players want to be, and we saw that this offseason. And all that stuff is wonderful. But at the end of the day, what you end up with is if this quarterback you drafted doesn't work out, then you better figure out an answer really fast, because it's not Carson Wentz. Again, all credit and respect to Carson Wentz as a journeyman backup who's gone 2-2, just like I said. Just like I said when they signed him. I said if you missed JJ for 4 games, he could go 2-2, and like I made it happen out of nowhere. There it is. Your journeyman backup. It's always been my standard, and he did it. So it wasn't pretty, but he got to 2-2. Anyway, going back to what you said, does he have the most pressure? I mean, that he's faced so far? Absolutely. Because he hasn't won a playoff game yet, and the most valuable merchandise at quarterback has played 2 games in how many months since he left college? He left college. There's that website that will calculate this for you. Somebody log on to that. He left college in January of 2024. It is October 20th, 2025. He's played 2 games. That's that for somebody that you're really hitching your wagon to. That's not what you expected to happen. So when you hitch your wagon to somebody, well, there's a reason we say that, right? Is because it's which way that goes is going to dictate how we feel about Kevin O'Connell. And the other thing is too, that, man, when you look at the Wilfs and how much money they spent, they're not into excuses. And we remember that from 2023 when we asked Mark Wilf, I think it was Kevin Seifert, and I was sitting at the table when he asked Mark Wilf, like, hey, but you had to play backup quarterback, so do you kind of grade on a curve? And Mark Wilf was like, no, we expect to be in the playoffs. They expect to be in the playoffs every year. So if you go 7-10 and the valuable merchandise doesn't play well, hey, I'm not into saying hot seat, fire this guy. That's just not my thing. I think with Zimmer, it got to a point where it was very clear what was going to happen. But, like trying to look, oh, hey, if this, and happens, he'll get fired. Well, let's not even go there yet. But the pressure, it ramps up if that happens. So it definitely ramps up. And I would totally agree that you're right. Let's see. Oh, hold on. Let me get my computer screen back right. Joe says they would have won yesterday if they ran the ball. Gonna have to be more specific than that. What play were they supposed to run the ball? I mean, is 2nd and 1 at the goal line, I think would probably be the one, and then they get the holding call. That's the one. Okay, that one I could go for, but I think it's become cliche. Somebody said, and I lost the comment about overreacting to say he's like as stubborn as Zimmer. No, I don't think so. But I do think you have to have a better running game and you have to play from ahead to run. Hunter says expectations have changed and that's not an overreaction. Yeah, I agree with that. Brand says I was very much against re-signing Darnold and there's still not a Super Bowl team with him, but it was the wrong move to move on from him. Yeah. I mean, so yeah, here's the thing about like the Darnold re-signing is I liked the way that Dan Graziano put it. Dan Graziano basically said, like, as of right now, yeah, it definitely looks like you should have just brought back Sam Darnold. And you're probably, at worst, you're probably 4-2. You might even be 5-1 because tell me Atlanta wasn't winnable. The way the defense played, yeah, they got ran against, but it wasn't like they were dominated. Yesterday was winnable. Don't throw a pick 6. Not that Darnold doesn't ever have his downs, but Pittsburgh was winnable. So maybe you're 4-2 if he's back and you can find the money when you look at the roster and who's underperformed for people that they spent the money on. But we're just not there yet for me. We're not at that point. It's crossed my mind. I have probably brought it up a little bit about how good Sam Darnold has played, but I don't think that we're at the point where we could say for sure because you got to see JJ McCarthy on the field. if JJ McCarthy plays and plays really well in the second half of the season, it will feel quite a bit different. But I also think, too, that two things can be true. I can totally understand why they went the way they did because it was the direction I've been banging the table for forever, right? But also, the list of quarterbacks who have thrown for 4,000 yards, won 12 or more games, and 35 touchdowns is pretty slim. Like, did we really think that it was just KOC? I mean, just Jefferson, as if there aren't other good receivers in the league. There's a couple playing tonight. I mean, I think when a quarterback rises to a certain level, we could probably say that they're going to be really good. I guess what they thought was the flaws in Darnold were probably too much to not have an unbelievable roster. That may have been true. And then this year, a lot of teams are mediocre, and maybe that would change. So, red zone play calls, 16 pass, 5 run. That's what I mentioned is that there were certainly some times in the red zone where they could have run the ball. And they decided to pass. So, okay, that's a specific issue with the play calling. Although they throw a touchdown, there's a bad, I don't know. There's so many opportunities there for Wentz to throw a touchdown, but maybe if they just ran every time, that it would have been different. I don't know. I thought the quarterback needed to make the plays that were just right there. So, why spend capital to get nasty in the trenches and not run the ball? I mean, in part because you're losing all the time. I mean, that's really been the main issue. When they were winning, they ran the ball a lot. And I think that we can't just continue to go back time and time and time again and say, run more, run more, run more, run more, run more, run more. It's like, oh, okay. And the bad play calling in the red zone, it's like when you have guys wide open, I just don't know. Like, you were supposed to do something different. But that, again, that's always the thing with the play calling is if it didn't work, you should have done something different, which I guess, it's hard to disprove. Anyway, the FanDuel question of the day. I'm not saying you're wrong about running more in the red zone. When you get to 2nd and 1, this is what you got Jordan Mason for. Run the ball. That I totally agree with in that sequence. In the other ones, okay, red zone. Red zone is the 20-yard line. I mean, maybe you could just run it every time and get into the end zone. I didn't think they were running that successfully. So if we were talking about, and they did run at the 1-yard line or the 3-yard line, and they got Jordan Mason in, but if we're just cutting it off at the 20, like that seems like a little bit of not quite fair because that's not an area where anybody just runs every play. Maybe inside the 10. Let's see. FanDuel question of the day before we get to Manny Hill and Brian Murphy is the Vikings dropped to plus 1,700 to win the NFC North. The Bears are ahead of them at plus 1,000. Are you buying right now that the Bears will finish ahead of the Vikings? I think, especially the way that the Lions are playing right now, the Lions still the team to beat. And Green Bay is flawed, but they've found ways to win, and they are significantly ahead. So you're not even in the conversation, I don't think, with Green Bay or Detroit. But what about Chicago? That is just gotten quite interesting. So, all right, let's change gears here. And it, as always, takes a second, but I'll get Brian Murphy and Manny Hill in there. So make sure you answer that question of the day. I think that the Bears have kind of lucked out with their recent schedule and that they will probably face some regression. But I also think that what we've seen from Ben Johnson is that he's no fool and that he can coach. So Brian Murphy jumping in here for the roundtable with Murph and Manny. Manny will be here in just a second. Murph, give me your reaction to that FanDuel question of the day. The Vikings now plus 1,700 to win the North, and Chicago has better odds than them. Is that fair or not fair?
I think it's fair based on how Chicago's kind of rebounded from their ugly 0-2 start. They're looking relevant, and it's sort of what we maybe projected a bit, that the Bears would be on the rise because of Ben Johnson, because they'd have some competent offensive play calling to go with Caleb Williams. And I think you've seen that come to fruition. Now, look, they're not going to have the Saints to kick around every week, so it's kind of convenient that they've been able to make some hay. because of their schedule. But the way the Vikings have looked, 3-3 is about where I think they deserve to be right now, and they may be fortunate it's not worse, considering they really haven't put together a complete game. Cincinnati, yes, but it was Jake Browning, and they were still a bit shell shocked because of the loss of Joe Burrow. I'm not sure they would have ragdolled the Bengals with Joe Flacco now the way he's playing. So I just haven't seen a complete 60 minutes at all from the Vikings. I'm not sure when we will.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with that. And thank you to Adrian for the super chat. And yes, I agree. That one sequence, I totally agree that 3 straight passes from the 6, you're right. They needed to hand off 2nd down and 1. There's no question. Yeah. So Manny, about that FanDuel question of the day, with the Bears now having a better chance to win the North than the Vikings, according to our friends at FanDuel, is that just an overreaction to the Bears pulling off some games against some really bad teams? Or do you think that this Vikings team is sort of destined to be where they are right now against a Bears team that's on the rise and other NFC North teams that are clearly thriving, including Murph's Detroit Lions as we speak?
Yeah, the Bears are an interesting team because they seem to be playing a lot better, but they've been doing it against, lesser competition. Even against, Washington, they had to kind of pull a rabbit out of a hat to and have some things go their way to win that game. And we're kind of starting to wonder how good of a team Washington actually is now,
Right.
and especially now with Jaden Daniels probably going to be out for a little while with the hamstring thing that he suffered yesterday. And they, like Murph said, I mean, they're not going to be able to kick around the New Orleans Saints every single week. Now, you do look at the schedule for the Bears over the next month, the next 4 weeks. They're at Baltimore. The Ravens have kind of struggled. We'll see what happens, when Lamar comes back. Cincinnati maybe has found some energy with Joe Flacco, but I don't know. The Giants are a mess. And then they're going to play the Vikings on November 16th. So if the Bears find a way to kind of keep this going over the next, if they win 2 out of the next 3 games to set up that matchup with the Vikings, that game's going to be really pivotal, I think, to kind of determine which one of these 2 teams is going to kind of avoid the cellar of the NFC North, so to speak.
Appreciate Score One More for the super chat, by the way. Also to Adrian, of course, you don't want Wentz to throw 42 passes. That's what happens when you're losing all day, and that's the problem that the Vikings have faced, right? I mean, it's a lot easier to pound away with Jordan Mason. And I also think that Carson Wentz on a play-to-play basis was finding open receivers all over the field. So they moved the ball quickly to score and stay in the game because they passed so much. But that's, again, I feel like it's just sort of something that gets boring to me of like, oh, they lost, so they must have had all the wrong play calls, no matter what happened contextually. So let's pull back a little bit and talk about where they stand just with quarterback again, Murph, where we're having this discussion about should they just play JJ McCarthy anyway against the Los Angeles Chargers. I say no, that it's not a good idea if he has not practiced at all to play him against the Chargers on a short week and just like, hey, go out there and just figure it out, kid. That didn't work very well against the Atlanta Falcons. I don't think that would work very well against the Chargers, and you risk the confidence, you risk the health, because if he doesn't know where to go with the football, then you're talking about taking hits. And Wentz is here in some ways to be a crash test dummy, so JJ McCarthy doesn't have to play while he's banged up. I think that calls for him to return are just frustration. And to tell you the truth, I also think probably boredom. I think that watching Wentz, and it feels like you're just not moving anywhere. I don't know if anybody else did this, but after my first 2 years of college, I took a year off. And let me tell you, about 3 months into that, it felt like, oh man, my life is moving nowhere. I am in total purgatory and I need to figure something out. I need to figure out how to be a professional podcaster someday. That wasn't exactly what I said, but you get the point. Like, I felt like, man, I'm going nowhere. And that's how it feels, Murph, with the Vikings as long as Carson Wentz is starting. So I think that the calls for JJ to start are less about the logic of it and more about the just let me see the kid play.
Yeah, and that kind of goes to the let's just see Max Brosmer play too, which is even more absurd right now. If you're, it's always about the shiny object that's not in. We went through this a couple of years ago with the carousel. Josh Jobs, Jaron Hall, they had a few moments. Nick Mullins had a moment, and you're wondering, well, maybe they can patch this all together. Well, over the course of 2.5 months without Kirk Cousins, we saw what happened. This is what you have with Wentz. He's erratic. He's rusty. He's indecisive. He runs into tackles, and he's also a fearless playmaker that can occasionally fling a pass and get some momentum going and find the playmakers. You're going to get the balloon ball pick sixes. You're going to get the balloon ball interception and the pick sixes because this is who he is. This is who he's always been. This is the same guy 31 other teams said we don't want as of August 23rd. And the only reason he's here is because they whiffed on Sam Howell. So to really expect him to be doing much more is probably a fool's errand. And the idea that, well, it's just not working, you got to get McCarthy in there, would fly in the face of every bit of logic and every bit of lecturing Kevin O'Connell has given us over the last several weeks about how important it is to have continuity for the week, how important it is to have his right ankle completely healed so that he can plant and throw and drive and get out of the pocket, escape pressure, make things happen. They're going to have one practice this week before getting on a plane to LA. So the idea that he's going to just practice tomorrow, everything will be fine, get him in because we already know what we have with Wentz and he can't be much worse. Well, I think he can be much worse, and he might be much worse because he's coming in so cold and so, I would say, unprepared. You've got another long week ahead leading up to the Detroit game. But again, where is his high ankle sprain? And are we talking about something that, how forthcoming have they been? They've been kind of slow playing details about this injury. We know high ankle sprains are fickle. We know they take a long time to heal. And the way O'Connell's been describing what needs to happen for him to heal makes this sound like it could be several more weeks. So the notion that suddenly all of that's going to get thrown out in a panic move and they're going to thrust him in the lineup on a short week, not only is it absurd, but it flies in the face of everything we've heard.
Well, the other day I wrote, Manny, that whatever they think is the best thing to do for JJ McCarthy, short and long term, is what they should do, no matter how popular and also no matter how panicked. And it would make sense to me logically that he should be healed up enough and with enough practice leading up to the Detroit game. I think if he's not, then you're really saying, okay, like you said, Murph, he said he had swelling. He traveled all the way over to Europe. Probably shouldn't have done that. Didn't get any practice over there. Comes back, can't practice in full because he's not up to 100% with the ankle. I mean, I can be on board with all that, despite everything that people on the internet are saying to get themselves engagement or whatever else. Okay, all that sounds very reasonable to me for a young quarterback to not be forced back out there. I do think if he's not playing against Detroit, because if they had beaten Philly with Wentz and then they beat the Chargers, like now we're talking, okay, well, they're playing really well and they don't want to bench their starting quarterback, so go until the wheels come off. But basically the wheels came off against Philadelphia. No matter what happens against Los Angeles, the run-up should be good. But I still think, even if Kevin O'Connell feels like I need one more week with him before I really feel confident, then do it, because you're not making decisions based on just this season with JJ McCarthy. It is not his last season, I don't think, in the NFL, or at least the way that they should see it. I know every game feels like it's the end of days, but if you're looking at him like, hey, you want to have the best possible sample size of him to also evaluate, not just to win and get better performance than you did with Wentz, but also to evaluate what you actually have here, because you're going to have to make a decision. Is he your quarterback, or do you need to call Mac Jones and get him in here and start next year?
Yeah, and I think they know and they understand, and they know this better than any of us because they are seeing him every day and they are in those offices having those conversations about this huge investment. I mean, it is JJ McCarthy is an investment. I mean, he's on a rookie scale contract, but this is still a massive investment because this is potentially the future of your franchise that you have control of right now. And you don't want to treat anything with kid gloves, but you also have to be very careful not to put him out there in a situation where he's just not ready to go yet. And if he's not fully healed, that ankle is not fully healed. I mean, we've been having conversations about, and Kevin O'Connell's been having conversations and being asked about, where JJ McCarthy is at from a mechanical standpoint. I mean, well, if he's not fully healthy, you throw him out there and he's going to be doing things on an ankle that's not 100%, and that could potentially screw up his mechanics. And if that's something he's already needs to work on, then you're potentially risking like just screwing him up completely and permanently. And so you do have to be careful. You don't want to, you don't want to slow cook this thing too much, but you also have to play your cards right. And I understand, like, just selfishly speaking, I want to see JJ McCarthy play. I want to see what they have. I want to see if he's the guy that's going to be the franchise quarterback for the next decade. We all want to see that. But I only want to see that when he's actually ready to play, because if he's not, you're making a huge risk of really screwing him up. And if you do that, now you're back to the drawing board and having to take another quarterback and invest in another development and another 2 or 3 years of figuring out what you actually have.
Oh, trust me, some of us are invested financially when it comes to the views that YouTube videos get, the subscriptions, all those sorts of things in JJ McCarthy starting. But I cannot sacrifice my journalistic morals and demand that JJ McCarthy start. But clearly, everybody wants to see McCarthy out there and start finding out what you have. That's absolutely true. But if you do it too soon, then you're not finding out. Then you're finding out a version that's unprepared, or you're finding out a version that's not at 100% health.
Yeah, and Coller, to kind of piggyback off of what Murph was saying too, the shiny new object. We talked about this late last year when everybody was going after Sam Darnold and ripping him because he had not finished the game or not finished the season very well. And everybody was like, get Sam out of here. Let's go to McCarthy next year. And I think some of that had to do with, there were a lot of quarterbacks taken in the top half of the first round in 2024. And we got to see all of those guys play last year. New England, look at the Patriots right now. They're in first place. They're 5-2, and Drake May is playing fantastic. You know what I mean? So if you're a Patriots fan, you're seeing your guy make these growth and have all this growth and development, and he's playing great. Penix has been kind of up and down for Atlanta, but he's playing. Bo Nix has a crazy comeback win against the Giants yesterday, and the Broncos are 5-2, so they're on cloud 9 right now. And if you're a Vikings fan, your guy that was drafted last year in that same draft, you're not seeing him. And when you're seeing all these other teams get to play with their shiny new toy, and you're not getting to see your shiny new toy, it gets frustrating, and you get impatient, and you get upset, and you start wanting them to start making rash decisions and throwing him out there. But I just can't stress enough, if he's not ready to go out there yet, they should not put him out there.
Well, and I also think that we all realize that the only chance they have of actually being a good team is if JJ McCarthy comes in and plays well. That Carson Wentz, should he play the rest of the season, they probably end up at 7-10 or 8-9. And then that's just who you are with a backup caliber quarterback, because that's where he's at in his quarterback journey, as Kevin O'Connell likes to say. So it's not just, and I agree with you that everybody else's young quarterback is playing and developing and growing, and you're not seeing that. But I don't think it helps him to go out there too early. And actually, the Patriots felt this way with Drake May last year. There were some miserable Jacoby Brissett games, and they sat him on the bench and they waited, and I think that it benefited him because he was ready to play when he actually got out there. And even then, there were some bad games. There were some ups and downs that were pretty tough for Drake May to have to work through it. to get to this point. So let's move on from that a little bit to something you mentioned that I've been hesitant to really go there yet. So this will be the question, Murph. Is it time to go there yet? And really what we're discussing is like, what's an overreaction? So is it an overreaction for the talking heads of NFL analysis world to be spouting the name Sam Darnold time and time again of, hey, maybe, and I saw Jackie mention in the comments, like maybe Sam Darnold was actually kind of the perfect quarterback for Kevin O'Connell. Now, the trouble is we did a roundtable right after the season where I argued that it wasn't a bad idea to bring back Sam Darnold. And so but then ultimately landed on, hey, if they really believe in JJ McCarthy, then that's the right way to go. And that's what it came down to for me is if they've seen a lot more of him behind the scenes than I have, if they're buying in, then they're buying in. Not really the question, would they be better with Darnold? I think we all know right now they most certainly would be, but they're not playing the first 6 games Super Bowl championship. They're playing the multiple years of the quarterback position, Murph. But is it too soon to have that discussion yet? Or should we be looking at that and saying, gosh, you guys really should have stayed with Sam Darnold?
Well, it's a convenient way to look at things right now. But if you remember, I mean, January 6th, most of the fan base could not get Darnold out of here fast enough after his performance in LA or in Arizona against the Rams in that relocated game and his performance against Detroit. But if you take that question and just keep it in a vacuum, it's hard really to analyze it, because what you need to do is take a step back and realize they didn't know what they had in Darnold. The end didn't help the cause for bringing him back, at least in the near term. They thought they had something in McCarthy before a knee injury derailed his development, but they have invested reputation and treasure into McCarthy. And you also have to realize if they did bring back Sam Darnold, what would they have invested in the meantime? What they did was, they were cute. They said, we're going to give it to the kid. We're going to spend some money elsewhere and build up the roster. The problem is the roster has failed to live up to the expectations, certainly defensively.
Mhm.
They have not played to the level that we were promised this revamped roster would do and allow a quarterback like McCarthy, maybe even Wentz, despite turnovers and short fields and sort of not a lot of continuity in the unit, the defense would take care of things. Well, they can't. At least they haven't. And granted, they played the Super Bowl champions, and Jalen Hurts obviously is the reigning Super Bowl MVP. He wasn't going to stay down that long. It's tough. I never had them beating Philadelphia, even when times felt great. So I'm not shocked they lost yesterday. But I think to really go, if they'd have just brought Darnold back, I'm sure they would be in a much better position, but they'd be a little more shorthanded defensively. Maybe that wouldn't have been a bad thing if they'd have gotten some younger, cheaper talent. These are all things you can unpack with that question. I think it was the right move to make at the time. I think philosophically it was the right move to make at the time, but we still really can't answer that question until we get McCarthy on the field for more than a week and a half.
Well,
so until that happens, we can't answer any question.
Well, I think where you could definitely say regrets is that, okay, we knew that every single dollar they spent wasn't going to work out the same way it did last year with Grenard, Van Ginkel, Cashman. You don't have that happen where a 2015 draft class or a perfect free agent class. We knew that, hey, maybe some of these guys won't click. We knew that maybe some of these guys will get injured. So, all right, well, you can find $40 million if you want to find it in the ones that we already have the answers about in hindsight. But, I think more so if we're talking about a miscalculation, Manny, to me, and as far as bringing back Sam Darnold, it's not so much about the way that Darnold has played, more about JJ McCarthy, actually, because the miscalculation was how far along he was going to be able to get from just starting to throw a football again in January after his injury and missing that entire season to the point where he was finishing training camp, and just the sheer amount of reps and work that you can get in. It doesn't take, they mentioned 10,000 hours. Quarterback should laugh at that. 100,000 hours. It ain't close to 10. I don't even know where that came from anyway. Some guy wrote it in a book and everybody adopted it forever. I promise you, as someone who's been trying to master several crafts my entire life, golf, playing guitar, doing it for 10,000 hours ain't enough. But anyway, that's, I think, the point, right? Is that every other quarterback in the league was playing and getting better. And still these guys aren't perfect mechanically. And they thought, no, we don't need to have him develop anymore behind somebody else. We need to see, as you said, the shiny new toy. We're going to go with it. He's going to have no camp competition. Maybe if they brought back Daniel Jones, it would have been a camp competition. Then everyone would have been pissed as hell when Daniel Jones won it. Like when you think about, there's also an element here that everybody on the outside, and I don't know how much ownership was involved in this. They usually aren't too much, but there's also an element where just the mobs of people screaming, get rid of Darnold. Do not dare franchise tag him. You will ruin the franchise. I want to see McCarthy. Don't keep Daniel Jones for competition. Like there was a lot of that of everyone just wants to see McCarthy, and they may have pushed, and including, I'm sure in the building, they're human as well, right? They felt the hurt of the Darnold thing more than anybody on the outside. I think that they miscalculated how far you could actually go in terms of gains when you haven't played the entire last year and really didn't throw a lot of passes in college either.
Yeah, and that was something that we kind of talked about as far as like if there were any concerns about going right to JJ McCarthy in 2025. This is why I constantly said over and over and over when we were chatting during the offseason about you don't necessarily have to go to JJ McCarthy yet. I mean, he has not played a lot of football, and that was one of the concerns that I think some of us had with him is that this guy has not played a lot of football, and he missed all of last year with the knee injury, and he wasn't getting any reps in practice during the season. I mean, it's one thing if he was just sitting behind Sam Darnold because he's just not ready to play yet, and he's still getting some reps in practice and some sort of action, but like he wasn't allowed to do anything football related last year. And that you talked about the miscalculation. I mean, that I think has a much bigger effect on where he's at right now than anything else. I mean, aside from obviously the high ankle sprain has derailed some things too, but I think just the fact that he hasn't played enough football and done enough football things in, since that national championship game. I mean, I think that's just as huge a factor as anything else. And, I don't know, where would they be at if Darnold, if they had franchise tagged Darnold? I don't know. It's hard to tell. They wouldn't have some of the players that they have right now. But then again, how many of those players are really making a huge positive difference for this team right now? I mean, they're not really. So, maybe they would still be 3-3 if Sam Darnold had come back. And, at that point, people might still be, if they're 3-3 and Darnold's playing okay, but not great, people would still be clamoring for JJ McCarthy to play right now anyway. So it's hard to really tell where they would be at, but with what we've seen, it does, it does kind of make you wonder.
And this is where it comes back to, Murph, how can we say right now that it would have been a better idea if we don't know what McCarthy's going to look like? And, I think the most important thing, because there's still a lot of people in the comments arguing, hey, you got to put him out there anyway and everything else. I think the really important part is when you get your sample size, trying to do everything you can to make sure that it is a sample size you can really work with, because one offseason of taking second team reps and one preseason game was not a great sample size to make that bet on. And I think if there's any regret, it's probably that it wasn't a great sample size to make the bet on. But why I think it's too early to start saying it, Murph, is we just don't have the answer yet. And this could change, because when you think about how crazy this is, for fans this year, normally what happens, and you've covered the Vikings beat before, Murph, you know this, that, okay, camp starts, fans are like, does that smell like football? I guess it kind of is. I'll read the Pioneer Press where Brian Murphy's writing a little column, but I'm not going to pay that much of attention. Oh, a preseason game's on this nice summer night. Let me throw open the windows, watch the first quarter, and then move on with my life. for this year, the season started July 26th, and it was all eyes on, and I know this from my numbers. I've never seen anything like this. So all eyes on every report from what JJ McCarthy looks like in training camp. So it feels like the season has been going on for a really long time. I know I feel this in my energy level, but we are only 6 games into the season. There are twice as many games to go as there have been so far. So I think, Murph, I think it's too soon to start saying the thing. And this is coming from me, the biggest Sam Darnold defender in the room for a long time. But I really think it's way too early to start saying that, because this could very much change when we get to the second half of the season.
It's always easy to criticize the character actors in a play, but when your star is not on the stage, you can't evaluate anything else.
Right.
It's just, and the unintended consequences too, as we've been talking about this. Let's say they did bring Darnold back on maybe the friendly deal that they got with Seattle, or maybe it's a couple of years. Maybe they tagged him. All things being considered, how are they going to frame what McCarthy would have done in training camp? Is it a wide open competition? What if it had been Daniel Jones? Is it a wide open competition? And as you said, no one was going to root for Daniel Jones to win that, probably in the building either.
Right.
What if he did? And then what does that say about your draft prowess if you're picking up guys on the scrap heap and bringing them in to compete against your guy and he loses that job? Those are also damaging and also definitely disruptive. So they were able to clear out all of those kind of scenarios, but in clearing out all those kinds of scenarios, they also jettisoned 2 very capable and productive NFL quarterbacks who, Jones is having a Darnold resurgence right now with one of the surprise team in the league, and Darnold is really just kind of picking up where he left off out in Seattle. It's easy to say, well, of course, they should have done more to keep X, Y, and Z. But it wasn't just a matter of bringing back those 2 bodies. It was all the baggage it was going to bring with it, all of the context of JJ up, JJ down. Is he winning the battle? Is he not winning the battle? Should he get more opportunities? All of that is easy to kind of second guess and wonder about now because they are doing so well. And because we have 8 quarters of a sample size of McCarthy, 7 of which are pretty bad. But there's this sense out there that we know what we're going to get with Wentz, and we don't like it. We might get the same with McCarthy, but at least he's getting the reps. And I said this last season too, before they invested all their moves on kind of bolstering the roster, the interior line, and all that. Would you be content with JJ McCarthy going 8-9 and missing the playoffs? Because I think you should. And right now, if he comes back in a couple weeks and they end up finishing 8-9, I think you need to be satisfied with that because he is a developing quarterback. If you expect him to come back and just Sherpa this team all the way to the postseason, that's a lot to put on him when he's already had this herky-jerky start to his career. Asking him to save the 2025 season is a lot. And I just don't think that's fair. And none of the scenarios that have played out have anything to do with him. It's all the machinations around and the underperformance elsewhere.
By the way, Tampa just scored an awesome touchdown. Tez Johnson gets into the end zone. So Detroit not running away with this one like it looked like early. And Steven giving me a hard time for watching the game and reading the comments. You should see me play a game of chess, write an article, and have a conversation with my wife at the same time. I am a multitasking king. Reminder, FanDuel question of the day. The Vikings dropped to plus 1,700 to win the NFC North. The Bears are ahead of them at plus 1,000. Are you buying that the Bears will finish ahead of the Minnesota Vikings? So I think that we can thoroughly say that we've covered all angles with JJ McCarthy and the quarterback situation at the moment. And it feels like we could just keep rolling on back and forth and everything else. But also I'll agree, we do need to see him play more football. So let me go to something else, which is really where I started the show, which is about overreactions and whether people were overreacting to the loss to Philly. And because where we've gotten to is the point of enough games where we could start talking about some of those signings. Hey, was this one really worth it? When you have a defensive tackle you paid 15 mil who plays 18 snaps, and somebody else who is an undrafted free agent who's playing great, by the way, but is playing 50 snaps, like that doesn't really look like that's how it was supposed to be drawn up. Is it an overreaction, Manny, to start looking at the offseason moves and making determinations about whether they were right or not? Or, I mean, so if a guy's hurt like Ryan Kelly, obviously, yeah, that one's not working out. Aaron Jones not working out. Okay, that's fair. There's no real debate about it. Those guys got hurt. But for the guys that are playing, when we look around at all the money that was spent, it has not been justified with a 3-3 record. If it's an overreaction now, then when does it become not an overreaction? Like, when will we be able to say with enough sample size, hey, that Allen signing, who played really well yesterday, by the way, or Javon Hargrave signing, or Byron Murphy giving him the bag, because Murphy was also right there when A.J. Brown, who, by the way, looks like, you ever see one of those wrestling matches where they get in the ring and it's like the big guys and then the small guys come out or something, and they're like, they pick them up and throw them out of the ring? That's what it looked like A.J. Brown in the corners for the Vikings yesterday. It looked like Derrick Henry's high school highlights yesterday versus the Vikings corners. But Byron Murphy, you bet on, and look, I like Byron a lot, but 6 interceptions was going to be hard to repeat. They sign Isaiah Rodgers. They love him. It's Flores' guy, and he has that one great game, but the rest, especially yesterday, has been a backup level play or average level play that hasn't, justified that. Jeff Okudah got beat several times yesterday in big moments. Are we just so annoyed with the team underperforming that we're like pointing at things and raging out against it? Or is it time to start saying, hey, some of that money you spent, and some of these decisions you made, they're just not good enough?
Yeah, I see. I think it's the latter. I think it's fair to look at everything that they did and just say, you know what, it's just not good enough. It's got to be better. I mean, they spent a lot of money, particularly on defense and on the interior of the offensive line, and that's mostly just been kind of injuries with Jackson, and obviously the Ryan Kelly situation is really unfortunate. But they did spend a lot of money and they invested a first-round pick on an offensive lineman to really kind of solidify the weaknesses that they had last year on a team that won 14 games. So there was an expectation that, okay, to repeat a 14-3 regular season was going to be a lot to ask. But the thought was, you spent all this money on guys, not just like, we're talking about veteran players here, guys who have been good players at other places. Ryan Kelly's been one of the best centers in the NFL for the last decade. Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave have been really good defensive tackles for a long time. Now, some of that you could say, well, these guys are kind of in their 30s and, they're kind of on the other side of their primes. And, maybe it's a little unfair to expect them to be the same guys, but you paid them like you expected them to be the same guys, and they haven't been. But the other part of this is, as we always say, context matters. And some of this stuff is, particularly with the tackles, this team, save for the Cincinnati game, for the most part, even with the Browns game, this team has been playing from behind a lot this year. And that, we talked about this last week. Allen and Hargrave are not built to be, just a run stuffing defense that's going to shut down the other team's, opposing running game. Now, yesterday they handled Saquon Barkley pretty well, but it didn't matter.
Right.
Because Jalen Hurts is awesome.
Right. And just to jump in there, Manny, you can take deep shots like that when you're winning. Like when you're up, you can just be like, oh, why don't we just try to get an 80-yard touchdown off a play action?
Yeah. So I think a lot of this is, I think the criticism has been fair. They do overall as a whole need to get better against defending the run, but they were pretty good yesterday. But the other part of this is they got to find a way to just get a lead, get off to a really good start. I don't know. Does that mean that Kevin O'Connell, if he wins the coin toss, he needs to elect to receive? I don't know. I don't even know how it went yesterday, but the Eagles took the opening drive of the game, went down and scored a touchdown, and you're already in trouble.
Right.
Because you're already behind. And that's just not the recipe for this team to win games, because whether it's Carson Wentz or JJ McCarthy, this is an offense that has talent, but it's not really an offense because of where you're at with the quarterback position. It's not an offense that you can just go out and have shootouts, or you can fall down by 2 scores and throw your way back into a game and find ways to win games like that. They did it against the Cleveland Browns because it's the Cleveland Browns. So, of course, they were able to do that. But a better team like Pittsburgh, you fall behind, it's going to be tough sledding to try and get back. And they got back into that game, but it was just too late. A championship-level team like Philadelphia, you fall behind, you're screwed. It's going to be really, really hard. And we're going to see, the challenge is going to be there with this Thursday against the Chargers. And when you go to Ford Field on November 2nd, whether it's JJ McCarthy or Carson Wentz, you fall behind at that place, it's over. You're done. You got no shot. So that part of it too, I think, is they've got to find a way to get off to a good start offensively. You get down into the red zone, whatever, run the ball a lot more. I don't know, whatever, but you get down to the red zone, score a damn touchdown and get yourself off to a good start, get a lead to allow your defense to play with a lead. And then that's going to open things up, I think, offensively for you too, because then you can be more balanced with Jordan Mason and hand the ball off to him much more. Because we saw that against Cincinnati. that was the perfect recipe. The way it was a dream, but that was the perfect recipe of how this team is going to win games. And if you fall behind, it's not going to work.
Yeah. Carson Wentz's first drive went right down the field.
Yeah, 100%. Yes.
I was going to pile on here a little bit. I think it's absolutely ripe for criticism to look at the moves that have been made and try to find the true value there. I also, I think it was maybe unrealistic to expect them to be the splash play, lightning bolt defense that they had been the last couple of seasons. Some of those turnovers, obviously Van Ginkel hasn't been out there, but a lot of those turnovers, I'm not saying we're fortunate, but you're probably not going to get those scenarios that they had defensively last year line up the way they did. But the reason the defense could be so aggressive, could afford to be so aggressive and blitz and disguise blitzes and just befuddle teams is because the Vikings were constantly winning or in double-digit leads early in the season. I mean, if the stat, I know you wrote about their how much they've been in a deficit this season, and I'd like you to bring those up in a second because I remember reading that, and it reminded me again. I know I brought this up a couple times, but we pounded this stat early last season. I believe it was 4 minutes and 30 seconds, or something to that effect, that they had trailed when they went 5-0 throughout that stretch. So the defense, was playing with house money the whole time. Now the defense is being asked not just to hold steady, but also to bail out the offense. And it feels like they're operating uphill all day long. Now, nobody's going to feel sorry for them. They're getting paid to make plays and turn games around. But when you are constantly behind the sticks, when you are constantly on short fields, and when you watch your team march down the field and stall drive after drive and have to settle for field goals against the Super Bowl champs who can just drop back and throw a lightning bolt, that's got to be demoralizing. And it's been like that week after week, and that is emotionally and physically taxing. The defense can do better. The high-priced talent can do better. But a lot of the struggles are because of what they're not doing offensively.
Well, and this is why so much gets paid to quarterbacks and so much attention gets paid to quarterbacks. And we went through this a lot with Kirk, where we would argue about his impact on different things like the number of 3-and-outs that they would have and how that would affect the defense and how it always made life harder for the defense. And these two things are very interconnected. So when you've gotten bottom 5 quarterback play on the whole, just as a team, bottom 5 to 7, I'll look up where they rank as a team quarterback rating. I'm guessing that overall it's not very good. Going into this game, Detroit scored again, by the way, Murph, if you were wondering. But if you're getting bottom 5 quarterback play, it's really going to hurt your defense. Let's see. Hasn't quite been that bad. It is, let's see, 22nd. Okay. Point made. 22nd in quarterback rating in the NFL. Sorry, you're probably not going to be helping your defense much, right? And
it's not good enough.
If
it's not good enough.
And really, like as bad as some of the moments were for the defense, they give up a pick 6. They give up 21 points yesterday. It's pretty hard to win a game if you as a defense give up 21 and then, your offense can't score in the red zone, throws a pick 6. Like it does come back to your quarterback. And I think that it's made everybody look worse. And I brought this stat up the other day that they have actually faced the second fewest amount of passes in the NFL. You went out and paid for these pass rushers and they're not getting to rush the passer too much. Even Hurts threw like 25 passes yesterday. When another team is losing, they throw 45 passes and you get 100 sacks and pressures and all that stuff, which is probably what made those numbers for Grenard look so good last year and Van Ginkel, is that they were rushing the passer under favorable circumstances all season long. And yet that has not been the case. They've been trailing for 18 out of the 24 quarters so far, which is absolutely brutal. And so it's kind of built on itself. I do think that there was always, because sometimes we think of like first guess, second guess. I liked the plan. Okay, here's your weaknesses. Interior pressure has been a weakness for a while. Go get 2 defensive tackles to pressure the quarterback. Is that worth $36 million between those 2 guys? I don't think so, but you kind of spend stupid money when you have the rookie quarterback contract. This is what you do. You overpay guys, right? So I think that made sense from the start. Ryan Kelly, yes, had injuries, but still played like 800 snaps, 700 snaps last year. I don't think we would have expected he would play like 100 and then be out for this long. That's just bad luck. So some of this stuff was luck, or has been luck and circumstance related, where these two things are playing off of each other because you're not getting the type of QB play that you expected going into the season. I also do think, Murph, when you make a bunch of bets that have a 50% chance of paying off, sometimes it comes up snake eyes on you. Sometimes you miss on those bets. And I remember this
offseason. You can't cover every chip on the roulette table.
Right. I think that I remember this offseason where Seth Walder gave a bunch of the Vikings moves terrible grades. It was just like they overpaid this guy, they overpaid that guy. And my point was like, well, yeah, they can overpay because of the circumstance, but there's a range of outcomes with these guys. There was a range of outcomes where Javon Hargrave just wasn't great anymore. And there was a range of outcomes that was even likely that Ryan Kelly wouldn't play this much, or that Aaron Jones would get hurt or regress. Like that was there. And so I think when you're second guessing them, you have a right to do so, because like that was on the table, and they made a bunch of bets that they all needed to click at once. People will bring it back to the draft and all that, but I think you can also say some of the players that you went after in free agency were not the most likely to, they had probably the highest upside because they're former stars, but maybe not the most likely to click. So let's do this, Manny, in the last 10 minutes here or so, talk about the rest of the National Football League and the way things stand. I am curious what you think. So we don't know what Detroit's winning. They'll probably win this game. But right now, the Packers are minus 105 on FanDuel to win the NFC North. What did you make of the Packers game yesterday? Luckily, I was able to see a lot of it. Unfortunately, on the post game, just like I'm doing right now, on the post game, you see my eyes going back and forth to the TV as I'm talking because I was watching the Packers and the Cardinals. But not really the most impressive win, and I saw a lot of belly aching from Packerland, but here they are at the top of the division. What do you make of Green Bay at this moment?
It's hard to tell. In some ways, they kind of remind me of last year's Vikings team, where they're winning a lot of these close games. Like, they're going to make the playoffs, I think. Are they going to win the NFC North? Right now, I would say no. It looks like it's Detroit's division still to win for the third year in a row. But they are obviously very talented. The quarterback is talented. But they've been kind of squeaking out these close games, kind of like how the Vikings did last year. And I think you have to give them a lot of credit for finding ways to win games when you're not playing perfect football. But I question whether or not they're really built to go on a deep run. Now, maybe Micah Parsons just goes ham and like maybe he just turns into Lawrence Taylor for like 4 games or whatever in the playoffs, and that kind of propels them to go on a deep run. But I kind of wonder with just the way that they're kind of squeaking out games. They didn't look that great against Cincinnati at home, and they had to come from behind to beat the Cardinals yesterday. They had the weird tie against the Cowboys, a game that they almost lost. I mean, it was some questionable clock management there by Matt LaFleur at the end of that overtime. They had the bad loss to the Browns. They look like that team that's going to go. Well, they have a tie now, so they look
that's
like
going to factor. We know it will. It always does.
Yeah, it might. But they look like that team that's going to go like 11-5-1, make the playoffs. And then if they don't get a matchup that's favorable to them, that they're going to be one and done. Now, again, Micah Parsons gets hot and that defense becomes lights out, which they really haven't been yet. Then that could maybe change some things. But right now, the way they're playing, they just kind of look like a team that's good enough to make the playoffs, but not quite good enough to go on a deep run.
I think that they look like everybody else in the NFC who was anyone blown away by the Eagles? No. I mean, of course, their superstars were superstars, but it's not like they dominated every portion of that game. And hey, like, is anybody else kind of intrigued by the Dallas Cowboys? If they wouldn't that be something if the Cowboys ended up just going on a run here? Their offense is probably the best in the entire NFL right now. I think Detroit, with their injuries, if they get healthy, are clearly the best team in the NFC. I'm saying that when they have a lead. If they blow it, I'll take it back. Tampa Bay is much more flawed and has been smoke and mirrors this year. And the Rams are great. The Rams are absolutely great. They demolished the Jaguars on Sunday morning. And I think that blowout wins like that are pretty telling. So they're really, really good. Their defense is the real freaking deal. So right now, I mean, you'd put them, the Packers, right there with the Rams, maybe a touch ahead of them, the Lions ahead of them, but it's probably right in that same range. Murph, who in the NFC intrigues you the most? Because I'll give you my answer. The San Francisco 49ers being 5-2 is crazy. Oh, did I just steal? Okay, go.
You ask a question and then you stomp on it.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead. Say the 49ers.
All right. Yeah. San Francisco being 5-2. San Francisco being 5-2 with Mac Jones. San Francisco being 5-2 without Fred Warner, without George Kittle for most of the time. I think we thought this was going to be and they're going to have a heck of a quarterback decision to come up pretty soon with Brock Purdy. Maybe it's not maybe he does become Mr. Irrelevant again, even though they're not paying him that kind of money. I just feel like we don't exactly know, who's going to be emerging as sort of the alphas of this group, because there's so many new faces. Well, Christian McCaffrey's obviously going to be there, but they're so well coached. Kyle Shanahan's going to find a way. They're going to fight the Rams all the way. I feel like they are almost playing so loose and so confident because they've been dealt a pretty bad hand and it seemed to be thriving in spite of it. So yeah, I would say San Francisco being 5-2 and looking like they're not going to miss a beat despite the injuries might be my most intriguing NFC team.
Well,
so
and
please come over the top on that.
They've got the Vikings starting quarterback for next year, Mac Jones, right? So that's interesting. I
like that blueprint.
I said this off the air after I recorded with Jeremiah Searles early, but I was like, we're like 3 weeks away from picking candidates to compete with JJ McCarthy for next year. I'm not there yet, but man, we're marching toward that. Okay. Sorry for stealing San Francisco. It is fascinating though, where they're at. Just in general as a franchise of a team that probably missed its window and yet scratching and clawing to remain in the conversation. We had a lot of discussion about Sam Darnold tonight. I will say Seattle. I don't know what they're going to do by the time people go back and listen to this. They'll know the result for tonight against the Texans, but the Seattle Seahawks have a really talented defense that maybe hasn't been fully healthy or hasn't come together. They've got a good running game. And the way that Darnold is playing, they are a legit contender right with the rest of these other teams. And what a lot of these teams have that's so interesting is volatile quarterbacks. Like Dak Prescott's been there many times. How about Jalen Hurts? The volatility where some weeks he just has looked very poor, and other weeks, like last week, he looked amazing. Jared Goff's probably the most consistent of those quarterbacks, but in the playoffs, he lacks the playmaking ability. We know that Stafford, if he gets hot, watch out, but that's not always the case. So there's a lot of quarterbacks that are all really, really good, and in this conversation that are making it interesting. And also, I think all these teams have left the door open a crack for a team like the Vikings to get hot and compete for the playoffs as well. So we didn't do pick the schedule Thursday night. Obviously, I'll be in Los Angeles covering the game. How about we just do a version of that by saying, where is the bar now, Manny? Like, you don't have to speed run the schedule, but after losing that game, where does the bar sit for the 2025 Vikings?
Can you get to 8 wins? Can you get to 8 wins? I mean, it's going to be tricky with the way the schedule is laid out.
Didn't you have him at 11 like 2 weeks ago?
I had him at 10 when we picked the schedule on Thursday.
That's why we do it, Murph. Manny is immune. Manny is immune from criticism because he rides the roller coaster like everybody else. So he's brave enough to pick it every week. You can't criticize him for his results, because last year you were probably as low as 9 or 10 and as high as 15. So that's how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Look, I mean, if we're talking about a bar, not necessarily where I think they're going to end up. I think 8 wins. You got to get to 8 wins, and if it's 8 because McCarthy's come back and you kind of ride the roller coaster of dealing with a young quarterback, and you just deal with the growing pains of that, and you find a way to get to 8 or 9 wins, then I think you can be satisfied with that, like Murph talked about earlier. I think anything less than that, I think you're raising some eyebrows, because that probably means that you put McCarthy back in and it didn't go very well.
Right.
If you're 7-10 or 6, or heaven forbid 6-11, something like that, I mean, you'll get a higher first round draft pick, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I think in terms of like where the vibes will be at, how people are feeling about where this thing is headed, I think you got to try and get to 8 or 9 wins. If you can do that, I think people will feel okay. I think it'll be a little bit of a disappointment considering all the money you spent in free agency. But I think people will still walk out of the season feeling like, all right, 500-ish. McCarthy played all right when they put him back in. This is still heading in the right direction. Anything less than that, I think, is sounding some alarms.
What do you think, Murph?
Yeah, I like to, I had him at 10/11 going into the season. I've been kind of clinging on to 10 throughout the European trip. Now I'm down to maybe 9 is feasible. But I think 8/9, and I got to go back to just how I felt last season as we were chewing over even during the season, do you bring Sam back, and how complicated is this going to be? And what does this mean for the franchise if they do? And what does it mean for McCarthy? I still felt comfortable saying, look, he may go 7-10, 8-9 next season as pretty much a rookie. You should feel okay with that if he's developing. You should feel good about that if he's having moments. You can't always expect, maybe a Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels kind of they're going to suddenly be the alpha and they're suddenly going to be leading their teams to playoff wins. But the way this roster has subsequently been constructed, I think a lot of people thought you should be expecting McCarthy to win 10/11 games, which is why I bought in, because I was drinking all that purple Kool-Aid all summer long. I think the playoffs are, within grasp but fading, and I think there needs to be a recalibrating of expectations, because really it's about what McCarthy can get under his wing this season. And it may only be a handful of wins. It may be a handful of moments. But that's kind of the bed they've made at this point, and you need to know more about McCarthy than you need to know whether this team can scratch to 9 or 10 wins.
I think if you get to 8, you can at least grip onto that means some things went well along the way and that there's a lot to work with here going forward. Because when you think about it, like, yes, it is all in ish, but it's not all in as in they're going to lose all their players after this year. Remember, like 2019, they were literally going to lose like 7 star players after that season. Darisaw's here a long time. Jefferson, we assume Addison, if you just maybe stay in your house and don't ever go outside. I found out you can order groceries now. They'll bring them to your house. Like, do that. Just don't ever leave. But
I do it all the time.
It's just,
and I'm broke and I do it all the time. He's not.
Okay. I was feeling a little bad about it. I'm like, I don't know, like, it just, shouldn't I get my lazy butt up and just do it? But anyway, Mason will be here. Brian O'Neill's got years left. Will Fries is under contract long-term. Like, you're not just going to lose the whole offense. You get another, pro center, and all right, you've got your offense to go forward with JJ McCarthy. It doesn't end if you don't win the Super Bowl this year. But if you go, as you said, Manny, 6-11, I mean, there's just, you are literally talking about Mac Jones. You are saying like, who is available at quarterback that could be our Daniel Jones, our Sam Darnold again, because it's going to be a wide open competition in training camp. And that is
And does Kevin O'Connell get to make that decision? And Kwesi?
Yeah, they will.
After
right?
6-11?
Okay. I mean, like, they don't quite have knighted status as in like a Kyle Shanahan who had a 4-win season. I think he had a 4 and a 6-win season. He had won a 6-win season last year. Like, it's stupid to just fire coaches and stuff. Like, bad franchises do that. I don't think this franchise is going to be reactionary for 1 year where everything went wrong, but it does turn up the heat for sure if that doesn't work out, because that means the guy that you hitched your wagon to, it did not work out, or at least for the first year. And there's a lot of pressure there at that point. They can start avoiding that with a win against the Chargers and then come out of it 4-3 with JJ McCarthy. And then you feel like season is very much still on. So let's close with that. Manny, do they beat the Chargers?
I think they will find a way. I think it'll be ugly, but I think they will find a way. The Chargers are a weird team right now too. They got their butts beat yesterday too. So, I think it's going to be a weird week because it's short and it's a travel, but I think they're going to find a way to squeak out, and it might be like, how the hell did they do that? But somehow they found a way to win that game.
Hey, Will Reichard banging him home from 59 like it's nothing. 5 more field goals. Why not? Murph, do they win this game?
Yeah, maybe like Jacksonville last year. I just feel like, Parker Romo, but I feel like it's 51-49 that they win. And I'm only saying they're going to win because it is a coin flip game.
I thought you meant the score was going to be 51-49.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have said percent. No, God, no, it's not going to, it's going to be ugly. It's
Thursday night football. You never know.
I feel like both teams are in disarray. They're both injury riddled. Their seasons aren't going how they thought they were. Yes, they have Justin Herbert, but he has no protection. I just feel like the urgency for the Vikings is here. And this really feels like they have to pocket this one so they can get their long mini bye and again, make a quarterback decision and then go into the cauldron of Detroit.
Right.
But if they can have a quarterback decision in hand by then, I would feel like their season may get on track, but it's not going to be easy. And I don't understand what they did to deserve 2 games in Europe and then 2 weeks later flying to LA again on a short week, which is exactly what they did last year to play the Rams on Thursday night. Why don't they get a home game for this? This is not doing them any favors at all. That could be their downfall because the Chargers, as banged up as they are going to be sleeping in their own beds.
When it comes to strength of schedule, we always just looked at the opponents, but we never thought about how this thing was actually laid out. like a Monday Night Football, then Sunday night. So you don't even get the extra day. So it's short rest right away. Then you are short rest because you're traveling for 8 hours to go to Dublin and then staying over there, which was clearly a mistake that they will not repeat in the future. And then coming back, you get your regular bye week and then have to play again on short rest very soon after. Not exactly the easiest set of scheduled games that I've ever seen. So anyway, Manny Hill, Brian Murphy, we will be back on Monday doing this here live stream again and reacting to whatever happened and maybe talking about JJ McCarthy's return start. I guess we will find out then. So thank you to both of you. I have a couple more things to say before I wrap up the show, but really appreciate you guys, and I will see you guys on Monday.
Football.
Sounds good. Football.
All right. Want to make sure that everybody answers the FanDuel question of the day. The Vikings plus 1,700 to win the NFC North. Bears are ahead of them at plus 1,000. Are you buying that the Bears are better than the Vikings, or are the Bears smoke and mirrors and you think the season is still going to turn around? Make sure you answer that. And before I close, I want to say that something happened today that really gave me perspective on what I do here, which was a chess streamer by the name of Daniel Nerditzky died at the age of 29. And I followed him for, I want to say, probably the last 4 or 5 years. He has become one of my favorite people to watch. I've learned endless amounts of chess from him. And I am in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, who watched and enjoyed Daniel Nerditzky during his lifetime as a streamer, as a teacher, as a YouTuber, as a commentator. He was commentating on the World Chess Championships and hundreds of other events that I like to tune into. And I thought about the amount of support that you guys have given me over the years and the amount of people who have asked to say hello at a Vikings game, or who send me emails, or who just tune in every night, comment, or even those who don't. And just like me, I never commented on a single Daniel Nerditzky video, and yet I was the hugest fan of his work, and he was brilliant. He was a genius when it came to chess, but also brilliant when it came to speaking and explaining the game. And every time a new video would come out of his, I would run to the phone and make sure that I took time to watch his video. And I took so many lessons from him, but also even just thinking about the way that I present this show and do these things and analyze the game of football through a lot of his lens of the way he looked at chess. And I make a lot of those comparisons all the time. And I was absolutely shocked and heartbroken to find out that he had passed away today. So it really kind of put in perspective how blessed I am to have you guys supporting me. And I feel like even if I don't know you, I make connections with you. You follow along with me. You get to know little parts of me the way that I did with him over the years. And I think I always have to keep in mind, even when we're debating football and getting into it and all those things, just how lucky I am to have that, because I hope that I mean 1/10 to you talking football as much as Daniel Nerditzky meant to me talking chess. So I know that there's probably not a huge crossover here, but I really wanted to say that because he just meant so much to me during his lifetime. It will never, ever be forgotten. And his videos and his chess analysis and listening to him talk for hundreds of hours will stay with me forever. So rest in peace, Daniel Nerditzky, and he will be greatly missed from people like myself who love the game of chess. So that's it for tonight. We'll be live streaming again tomorrow. We'll have some Chargers guests, some breakdowns there. We'll turn the page on to the next game and continue the chat. We'll also hear from Kevin O'Connell. We've been talking as if we know what's going to happen, but we don't at the quarterback position. So we will find out probably tomorrow, and we'll get his comments and play you some of those on tomorrow evening's show. So thank you again for everybody for joining, playing along, getting in the chat, and we'll catch you all next time.